These quarters pass through millions of hands, but most people never check them properly. Welcome back to Change Your Life. Today, we're looking at 3 Washington quarters that collectors still keep an eye on. 1986 P Washington Quarter. 1996 P Washington Quarter. 1988 D Washington Quarter. These coins feature the classic heraldic eagle reverse design and are struck in a copper-nickel plaid composition used for modern U.S. quarters. Most of them look worn, dirty, and heavily circulated, just everyday change people spend without a second thought. But sometimes, even common quarters can show min errors, rare varieties, or high-grade conditions that make collectors take notice. Before you spend your next quarter, take a closer look, because one small detail could make a big difference. Let's begin with coin number 1. Have you ever picked up a quarter? Looked at it for less than a second, and then dropped it back into your pocket? Most people have. In fact, that is exactly what makes today's story so interesting. Because sometimes the coins people ignore the fastest end up carrying the longest journeys. Today's story begins with the 1986 P Washington Quarter. A coin that most people would never stop to examine. A coin that blended into everyday life from the moment it entered circulation. And a coin that quietly traveled through decades of American history without asking for attention. At first glance, there is nothing dramatic about it. The familiar portrait of George Washington. The classic eagle design on the reverse. The same $quarter value people had seen for generations. Nothing appears unusual. Nothing appears mysterious. Nothing appears special. And yet, that is exactly where the story begins. Because the most overlooked coins often have the most overlooked journeys. When this quarter left the Philadelphia Mint in 1986, it looked perfect. The surfaces were bright. The details were sharp. The eagle on the reverse looked strong and powerful. Every line appeared clear. Every feature appeared untouched. Everything looked exactly the way it was supposed to. But perfection never lasts. The moment a coin enters circulation, its future becomes impossible to predict. Nobody knows where it will travel. Nobody knows who will carry it. Nobody knows how many years it will survive. The story begins the moment certainty disappears. Imagine receiving this quarter during the late 1980s. Perhaps it arrived as change from a grocery store. Perhaps it sat inside a cash register. Perhaps it moved through dozens of transactions before sunset. Nobody recorded those moments. Yet the coin experienced every one of them. That is what makes old circulating coins fascinating. They witness everyday history. Quietly. Patiently. Without recognition. Year after year. The journey continued. New owners. New locations. New experiences. The quarter kept moving. Hand to hand. Pocket to pocket. Store to store. Most people never noticed. To them, it remained just 25 cents. Collectors often see something different. They see survival. Because surviving circulation is not as simple as it sounds. Every transaction leaves evidence. Every surface mark tells a story. Every scratch represents movement. Every worn detail represents time. The longer a coin survives, the more evidence it carries. That idea becomes surprisingly powerful when you think about it. This quarter may have witnessed changing decades. New technology. New businesses. New generations. Entire chapters of American life unfolded while the coin quietly continued its journey. And through all of it, it remained. Still recognizable. Still circulating. Still carrying traces of where it had been. That is why collectors spend so much time studying condition. Not because they expect every coin to be extraordinary, but because condition reveals the story of survival. Some quarters become heavily worn. Others remain surprisingly sharp. Some lose detail quickly. Others preserve their original appearance much longer. Those differences create curiosity. Curiosity leads to closer inspection. And closer inspection is where collecting truly begins. The 1986 P. Washington Quarter represents something larger than its face value. It represents endurance. It represents movement. It represents the idea that ordinary objects can quietly outlive entire eras. Most people never stop long enough to think about that. Collectors often do. Because they understand something important. A coin is more than metal. It is a traveler. A witness. A survivor. Every mark on its surface is proof that it participated in countless ordinary moments that nobody remembers anymore. Yet the coin remembers them in its own way. Through wear. Through aging. Through survival. And perhaps that is why coins continue fascinating people decade after decade. Not because every coin is rare. Not because every coin is valuable. But because every coin carries a story. A story hidden beneath scratches. A story hidden beneath circulation. A story hidden in plain sight. And believe it or not, the next quarter in today's journey followed a completely different path. A different year. A different beginning. And another chapter waiting to be uncovered. The story now moves forward. To another Washington Quarter. Another familiar coin. Another piece of everyday change. And yet, another journey that most people never stop to consider. This time, the year is 1996. And the coin is the 1996 P. Washington Quarter. At first glance, it looks almost identical to countless other quarters. The same portrait of George Washington. The same eagle standing proudly on the reverse. The same denomination. The same purpose. Nothing immediately separates it from the thousands of quarters people handle every day. That is what makes its story so fascinating. Because the most ordinary objects often hide the most overlooked journeys. When this quarter left the Philadelphia Mint, it entered a completely different America from the one that existed when our previous coin began its journey. The world was changing. Technology was advancing. Communication was becoming faster. New opportunities seemed to appear everywhere. And right in the middle of that changing world, this small quarter quietly entered circulation. Nobody celebrated its arrival. Nobody predicted its future. Nobody imagined people would still be talking about it decades later. It was simply another quarter. Fresh. Bright. Untouched. Ready to begin its journey. And once the journey began, the story immediately became unpredictable. Because coins do not choose where they go. Life chooses for them. Perhaps this quarter spent its first day inside a busy cash register. Perhaps it traveled through several stores before sunset. Perhaps it sat inside someone's pocket for weeks before being spent again. Nobody knows. And that mystery becomes more interesting with every passing year. Collectors understand this. They know that every circulating coin carries a hidden timeline. A timeline built from thousands of moments nobody bothered to record. Think about that for a moment. This quarter may have crossed city lines. It may have visited places that no longer exist. It may have passed through businesses that have long since closed. Yet the coin continued moving. Quietly. Patiently. Without attention. That is what makes circulating coins different from so many other objects. Most everyday objects eventually disappear. They wear out. They break. They get replaced. Coins often survive much longer. Sometimes far longer. And survival creates stories. Every scratch becomes evidence. Every worn edge becomes evidence. Every faded detail becomes evidence. Evidence that the coin participated in real life. Evidence that it traveled. Evidence that it endured. That is why condition matters so much to collectors. Not because they are searching for perfection, but because condition reveals how much of the journey remains visible. A sharply preserved quarter tells one story. A heavily circulated quarter tells another. Neither story is wrong. They are simply different chapters. Different experiences. Different journeys through time. The 1996 P quarter spent years moving through everyday America. Through changing decades. Through changing technology. Through changing habits. Think about how much the world transformed while this quarter remained in circulation. Entire industries changed. New inventions appeared. Old routines disappeared. Yet this coin continued doing exactly what it was designed to do. Moving. Circulating. Surviving. That idea becomes surprisingly powerful when you stop and think about it. Because while people moved on, the quarter kept going. While trends changed, the quarter kept going. While generations grew older, the quarter kept going. A small piece of metal quietly witnessing time pass. That is why collectors often become fascinated with coins that most people ignore. Not because every coin carries enormous value, but because every coin carries evidence of survival. Evidence that history happened around it. Evidence that life continued around it. Evidence that ordinary moments are often more interesting than they first appear. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson hidden inside coins like the 1996 P Washington quarter. They remind us that ordinary things can experience extraordinary journeys. Journeys that nobody notices while they are happening. Journeys that only become visible years later. When someone finally stops, looks closely, and begins asking questions. Where has this coin been? Who carried it? How many miles did it travel? How many forgotten moments did it witness? Those answers may never be known completely. And perhaps that is exactly why the mystery remains so powerful. Because mystery creates curiosity. And curiosity keeps the story alive. But believe it or not, the final quarter in today's journey may be the most interesting chapter yet. Because its story begins in another year. Another mint. And another journey through time. The 1988 D Washington quarter. And its story begins next. And now, we arrive at the final coin in today's journey. The 1988 D Washington quarter. A coin that millions of people have seen. Millions have spent. Millions have overlooked. And yet, its story may be the most fascinating chapter of all. Because by now, you already understand something important. The story of a coin is never created at the mint. The story begins after the mint. The moment it enters the real world. The moment its future becomes uncertain. The moment its journey truly starts. When the 1988 D Washington quarter left Denver, it looked exactly the way a new quarter should. Bright surfaces. Sharp details. Strong lettering. A bold eagle standing proudly on the reverse. Everything looked perfect. Everything looked untouched. Everything looked ready for the future. But perfection has a very short life. Because circulation changes everything. A coin can leave the mint looking flawless. And within days begin collecting marks from everyday life. A pocket full of change. A busy cash register. A vending machine. A store counter. Small moments. Ordinary moments. Moments nobody remembers. Yet those moments slowly shape the coin's story. Imagine receiving this quarter during the late 1980s. At the time, it was just money. Nothing more. Nobody looked at it twice. Nobody stopped to admire it. Nobody imagined it would survive into a completely different century. And yet, here we are. Still talking about it. Still studying it. Still wondering where it has been. That is the fascinating thing about coins. They quietly outlast expectations. Think about how many times this quarter may have changed hands. Hundreds. Perhaps thousands. Each owner held it briefly, then passed it along. The journey continued. The story grew. Another chapter was added. Then another. And another. 4 years. 4 decades. Without stopping. The coin never knew where it would go next. And neither do we. That mystery is what makes the story so powerful. Because every old quarter carries questions that can never be fully answered. Where did it travel? Who spent it? How many cities did it visit? How many important moments unfolded while it sat unnoticed inside someone's pocket? Nobody knows. Yet the possibilities feel endless. Collectors understand that feeling. They understand that coins are more than currency. They are witnesses. Silent witnesses. Witnesses to everyday history. While people focused on their lives, the quarter continued moving. While decades passed, the quarter continued moving. While the world changed, the quarter continued moving. That endurance creates fascination. And fascination creates collecting. Because collectors are not only interested in metal, they are interested in survival. Every mark on a coin tells part of that survival story. A worn edge. A faded surface. A softened detail. Each one represents time. Each one represents movement. Each one represents another chapter completed. That is why condition becomes so important. Condition reveals how much of the original coin remains visible. Some quarters lose detail quickly. Others preserve remarkable sharpness. Those differences create endless curiosity among collectors. But beyond condition, there is something even more interesting. The human connection. Every coin has interacted with people. Real people. People whose names we will never know. People whose stories have been forgotten. Yet for a brief moment, their lives crossed paths with this quarter. That connection remains hidden inside the coin. Invisible. But real. And perhaps that is why coins continue capturing attention generation after generation. Not because every coin is rare. Not because every coin is valuable. But because every coin represents a journey. A journey through time. A journey through history. A journey through countless ordinary moments that together become extraordinary. And when you place the 1986p, the 1996p, and the 1988D Washington quarters side by side, a larger picture begins to appear. 3 different years. 3 different beginnings. 3 different journeys. Yet all connected by one powerful idea. Survival. These coins survived changing decades. Changing technology. Changing generations. Changing habits. The world transformed around them. Yet they remained. Still carrying their stories. Still carrying their mystery. Still waiting for someone curious enough to take a closer look. The next time you find an old Washington quarter, pause for a moment. Look at the date. Look at the details. Look at the wear. Then ask yourself a simple question. Where has this coin been? You may never discover the full answer. But that mystery is exactly what makes the journey unforgettable. Because sometimes, the greatest treasure hidden inside a coin is not its price. It is the story that traveled with it through time.